All right. Well, I too want to thank you guys all for being here, and just for the opportunity, Rob. Thank you and Tara for inviting us, or inviting me to come up and to share.
Your name? Your name?
Renae Storms.
Okay.
I thought we did that.
I wasn't recording.
Oh. All right. So anyway, I'm going to start my story kind of way back, but I skip a lot of years, so don't worry about that part. As a kid growing up, my parents were not Christian. They were not Mormon. My parents were both mostly drinkers, and my stepdad was in the military. So I grew up moving around about every 3 months. And my parents were drinkers. So about the time when I turned about 10 years old, my parents decided I would make the perfect bartender. So I was behind the bar in the house, and as they had parties, I would mix drinks for all their friends. I knew who they were, what they drank, I knew what they mixed it with, and I sat behind the bar making drinks. And so this was our weekends. That's what we did on the weekends. I would wake up the next morning and find multiple military men passed out throughout the house because they invited all the single men to come from the base. My stepdad was Navy. So there were a lot of people in the house all the time. So that's the environment I grew up in. By the time I was 12, I drank almost daily, 14 for sure, drinking daily. And that was kind of my life, moving a lot and drinking a lot. And I didn't know everybody didn't do this. So when I turned about 15, 16, and kids were like, oh, there's a party over at Joe's house, let's go. And I'm like, why? I drink at home. You know, they were like, but there's going to be beer. I'm like, I don't like beer. You know, and so it was just an unusual thing. And I had no idea that the whole world didn't grow up this way. So I thought it was just how it was. So I got married at 17 and moved to Germany. My husband was in the Army. I decided military life was so great and wonderful, I needed to continue that. So I wanted to marry a military man. And so my husband and I moved to Germany. We're both 17 the day we get married. He turned 18 like 10 days later. So we're in Germany, and he's in the Army. His brother is also in the Army, and they were very close, but they were stationed on opposite sides of the world. So he wanted to get to know his brother better. So when the Mormon missionaries came by the base, he thought this would be a great way to get to know his brother. His brother had converted to Mormonism in high school for a girl he dated. So he was like, I'll get to know my brother better. We'll invite the missionaries. I was like, you have fun with that. I want no part of Mormons. I knew a few in high school. People are weird. I'll be in the bedroom. And so I went to the bedroom, and he did not allow that. He was like, no, ma'am. You will be out here. You will participate. Be nice. So I sat in a chair that had arms, and I remember gripping the arms with such intensity, my knuckles were white. I didn't have a happy look on my face. I wasn't friendly. I wouldn't shake hands. I wanted no part of Mormonism or these missionaries. So they came 3 or 4 times, and they said, on the last visit, they left a Book of Mormon, and they came in and they said, our mission president has said we can't come back. He feels that we're driving a wedge between you and your husband, and so we're not going to come back. And I was like, yes! See ya, get out. I was ready for him to go. But they left a Book of Mormon and challenged me to read it. Well, where we lived was a German base with an American unit. There were only 25-ish American men stationed there, and only 2 were married who were enlisted men. All the rest were officers. So it was my husband and myself and one other couple. So she's the only person, the wife of the other guy's the only one I'm allowed to associate with military girls. She can't fraternize, and so I couldn't associate with the officers' wives. This gal had a 2nd grade education, had never gone to school really, and we lived on opposite sides of town. And so one of the things I did to kill time was read. I had read all the books I could find at the base, in the base library. I had read everything that I could pick it up and start quoting it, you know, and just knew it. So I finally broke down and said, all right, I'm going to read the Book of Mormon. What can it hurt? A week later, I had finished it, chunked it on the coffee table, and said, nice story, but it's not true. And I'm going to prove those missionaries wrong. So I went in the bedroom to pray and to ask God. And now I didn't have a relationship with God. I had never probably prayed before in my life. I don't remember ever praying. I didn't know the Bible. I didn't know anything, but I was like, I'm going to prove them wrong. So I went in the bedroom to pray, and as I prayed, I felt like the lights had come on. I felt a warmth come over me of unconditional love. Now, one of the things I didn't talk about, as a kid, my stepdad had actually molested me for many years. And so I had never felt loved. I had never felt good enough. And so this unconditional love washed over me as I prayed, that it just was incredible to me, that there was even such a feeling, that I could feel this good. And then I felt like a quilt had been taken out of the dryer and just wrapped around me, and I felt hugged and loved and complete and more better than I'd ever felt before. Bad grammar, but I just really felt amazingly good. And then I was like, this can't be right. And I'm sitting there, and I'm not opening my eyes, but my eyes are going back and forth trying to figure out what's going on. Where am I, and what is this that's happening? And as I'm going through this, I sense the words pass through my mind, this is my church, and this is where I want you to be. And I'm like, no. So I'm devastated. I cry for a couple weeks. I go back, and I repeat the process. I pray. All those same things happen again. You know, the warmth, the love, the words, all of it happens all over again. And I'm like, oh man, why did I do this? Now I have no choice but to join, because I told God I would do what he said. So now I have to join. I have to go be a stupid Mormon, and I don't want to be a Mormon. And so I joined the Mormon church. My husband never did. He and I were actually separated at the time when I joined, and then we got back together. And so he semi-tolerated me being semi-involved, but I was really on the fringes, mostly inactive. We had 3 more kids. I had 1 when I joined the church. So we had a total of 4. And when my youngest was 3, my husband and I divorced and separated. And that's when I dove into church 150%. When I left my husband, he was also very, very abusive. We were actually taken into protective custody. And so we were put in a safe house overnight. And we weren't allowed to take anything with us. We went back to the house, could only get like 1 item of clothing per person, 1 blanket, 1 pillow, very minimal. I found a house, I moved into a house, everything I owned, and my 4 children and a 200-pound dog fit in a Nissan Sentra. So it was not a lot of stuff. We moved into this house. Well, my husband found us, and he stalked us for a long time, but this was all pre-stalking laws. So we were moved from home to home to home every day for about 30 days. Well, the Mormon church, I contacted the gal who was my visiting teacher, and they just loved on us, found me a place, found me stuff, filled my house with the furniture I needed, gave my kids all the things they needed, and I dove in 150% from that point. So I began to attend church every week. I began to, of course, raise my kids. They ranged in age from 3 to 8. So in, trying to think what year that would have been. That would have been 84. My youngest would have been 3. So that's in 84. So we fast forward, and that was in California. I moved to Texas. All my family is in Texas. So I moved there with my kids. And we get a house for rent. My husband shows up. He breaks in. He's now my ex-husband. There are laws, but I still couldn't prove it was him, but I know it was. So we're on the run all the time, but the church protected us. The church did a really good job of helping us with things where we struggled. And that kept me tied in. There was a point when I first moved to Texas that I was like, maybe I don't want to be a Mormon. There's all these rules and things, and I went to a Christian church near my home. My ward met in the afternoon, so I could go to the Christian church in the morning and go to the Mormon church in the afternoon. I kind of had one foot in both worlds for a while. Well, the bishop found out, and he was like, no, you got to pick. You can only do one or the other. You need to choose. And the Mormon church was helping me so much financially and with my kids and things that I was like, nobody else is ever going to do all this for me, so I stayed. Well, then I really got in hook, line, and sinker. I went to the temple in 1987 before they changed the ceremony. And went to the temple once a month. I made the trip to Dallas to do that. That was the closest temple. moved to Houston, did all the callings that a woman can do. I served in primary. I was in the primary presidency. I was in the Relief Society presidency. I was Young Women's president. Taught Sunday school, visiting teaching coordinator, did Cub Scouts at one point. I mean, anything they let women do, I did, and was all in 150%. So I'm losing track, sorry. I had 4 kids, 2 boys and then 2 girls. My third child, my oldest daughter, had diabetes, type 1 diabetes. And she was really severe. They call it brittle. She was very brittle. And in 1999, she died from the diabetes, from complications. She was 18, almost 19. And so for about 2 years, I kind of hung in and continued, kind of clung to my beliefs and hung on to, what I could from that. And about 2 years later, I was like, okay, all my kids left in high school. I can't have my kids sealed to me because I'm a single woman in the church. There's no priesthood. My daughter has now died. Where is the eternal family that the Mormon church promised me? And as I researched and studied that out, and I thought, okay, somewhere down the line, somebody's going to have to do his work and seal us together. And I don't want him for time and all eternity. And I don't want him sealed to my daughter for time and all eternity. When I left him, he had molested both of my daughters. They were 3 and 5 when I found out. And he had been molesting this daughter for 2 years. Is what came out in counseling. And so when I left, and I'm thinking through this process, and I'm thinking the only God I knew from Mormonism was a God of love. They don't talk about any of the other attributes of God, just that he's loving. That was all I ever got out of it. He's loving, 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 loving. And I'm thinking this God who loves me wouldn't want me married and sealed to this man who molested both of my daughters, who tried to kill me, who stalked me, who had created all of these issues for me. That just doesn't make sense to me. So that's when I kind of went back and went, the whole thing in 78 when they gave priesthood to the blacks bothered me, this whole racist thing. So I looked up and did some research on racism and the history of the church with that. And then it was like, and then there was the polygamy thing, and I don't really know how I feel about that, and I would research and look. But her death caused me then to look at other things. And the more I looked at, the more I found that I took issue with. That started in 2002, that I kind of started just researching. Now, I couldn't tell anybody. I thought anybody I tell that's Mormon's got to go rat me out to the bishop as an apostate. So I don't want to do that, because what if then I find out the church is true and now I've been kicked out? So I don't want to do that. All of my Christian friends, I thought, would say, I told you so, and would give me grief. And so I didn't have anybody I felt like I could talk to. There wasn't a group like this. There was nobody that I could talk to. So I went down. I love this story. This cracks me up. I look at it now and I just laugh. But I went to Lifeway, and I went in and I said, I need a Christian Bible. And she went, well, the Bibles are over there, and she kind of pointed me a couple of rows of Bibles. Well, of course, in Mormonism, the only thing you pick out is, do you want 1 book or 2, and what color do you want the cover, right? I go over here, and there's like hundreds of choices. And so I'm picking up, and I'm looking, and I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm going, I don't even know what I'm looking for. And I put it back. I get another one, and I look at it, and I put it back, and I get another one. And then what's down here? And then what's on that side? And I was a mess. I was a basket case. I went back up front, almost in tears, going, I need help. And she looks at me like I'm nuts. She's like, why do you need help? What do you need? And I went, I'm a Mormon. And she went, oh, you poor dear. She came around the corner, put her arm around me and led me over. She goes, okay, let's just kind of be real basic. So she got me narrowed down to 2. I knew I wanted a study Bible for sure. And we narrowed, and she convinced me to try an NIV, which I was like, oh no, it's got to be KJV. And she was like, no, you don't want KJV. You want something you can read and understand. And I was like, that's all I've ever read. But I ended up getting a Quest Study Bible. And so when I went home, everything I looked at in my Mormon scriptures, I'd look up in my new Christian Bible. I wanted to see what was changed. I wanted to see what was different. Anything I looked up in the Bible, I also looked up in my Mormon scriptures. And I did this for, I don't know, a year or so. And nothing really much came out of it other than it was just this arduous task. It was just overwhelming to me that I was being critical of every detail. There wasn't anything I could just accept or look at. I had to scrutinize it. I had to tear it apart. I had to pick it apart down to the nth degree to try and find what I could trust was truth, because I felt deceived and I felt lied to. So along somewhere in this area, as I researched the topics and things I found that I had never been told as a Mormon, all of this, I got very angry. I was livid. I spewed venom for months. Anybody said anything. I had a Mormon friend at work, and she was inactive as I went through this process, and she's the only one I had talked to at all. I mean, she was a Mormon. She didn't wear garments. She was really inactive. She had tattoos, you know. I was like, she's so far out there, so I can talk to her. She will understand. And so I said something to her one day, and she went, "What did they do to you?" I literally spun on my toe and just, you know, I just blew up at her. Just verbal assault. And I was like, this has got to end. There's something, you know, wrong. And this is when I was just starting to think Mormonism's wrong. It's false, and you've been lied to, and you've been deceived. And so this is the anger I went in with it. And so when I finally came to a point, well, actually, that was a little bit later. So this guy at work is also witnessing to me. There's a Christian guy at work. His name is Tim. And he begins to witness to me. And this is probably late 2003 or early 2004. He starts to witness to me, but I don't realize he's witnessing to me. He's asking me questions about Mormonism. What do Mormons believe about? What do Mormons believe about this? What do they believe about that? And I'm thinking, oh man, I'm starting to think Mormonism is wrong, and Tim wants to be a Mormon. I don't want to talk to him about this. I know he goes to church. He studies his Bible every day at lunch. And I know that he is a Christian, and I'm thinking, now he wants to move up to the next level. But I'm thinking maybe this isn't even right. And so I'm totally torn on this. And so as we talk, I share with Tim, and I say, well, Mormons believe this, or I've been taught that, and I give him the answer, and we go on. And it's a few weeks, and he'd ask me something else, and he'd ask me something else. And so we come down to it, and then he says, one time he says, my car broke down, and my wife really needs it, and you drive by my place on the way to work. Could you pick me up for a week or two while the car's in the shop? I'm like, okay. So he has me as a captive audience for an hour to work and an hour going home every day for 2 weeks. I start turning the radio up because I don't want to hear anymore, and he turns the radio down. And so he's talking to me this whole way. And somewhere along the line, one of the days, he says, we talked about grace. He said, can I tell you why your view of grace isn't biblical? It doesn't line up with the Bible. He didn't tell me I was wrong. He didn't tell me that I was deceived or lied to, but he just said your view of grace doesn't line up. And at that moment, I realized all the times we had had conversation, I had never once asked him what his opinion was. He had never rebutted anything I had said. He had never had any comeback. He just accepted what I said and went on. So I suddenly felt like this horrible person who had been very unfriendly. And I was like, oh yes, please tell me why my view doesn't line up, because I felt like I had been rude. So he told me, and we went through it. And I wasn't convinced that Christianity was right, but I was pretty strong on the fact that Mormonism was wrong. So as time went on, Tim invited me to come to his church. It was Pantego Bible Church. And he said, there's this guy, he's a former Mormon, and he's going to come and share his story of Mormonism to Christianity. Would you like to be there? Well, I'm thinking I'm 95% out of the church. And boy, all of a sudden I get all defensive. You bet. I'm going to be there and tell you everywhere that man lies, where he stretches the truth. And so I look back at that now and go, I was still all in, even though I thought I was mostly out. But I got very defensive. And so Sunday I showed up. I was at Pantego Bible Church. Tim and his family sit down in the second row because they have little kids and they don't want the distraction. So I can just almost touch the speaker who is on the platform there. And he and the pastor are having a conversation. And it's James Walker is his name, and he's president of Watchman Fellowship. And so he's telling his story. He was a fourth generation Mormon, and he is talking about his journey from Mormonism to Christianity. And at one point he brings up Heavenly Mother, and people in the audience and the congregation kind of laugh. Tim leans over and he goes, Renae, people are laughing. I said, yeah, I know, I hear that. It's not very nice. And he goes, is that one of those places he's exaggerating? No, that's true, Tim. Oh, really? Okay. He sits back. A few minutes, he's talking about something else. I don't remember now what the other thing was, but he talks about something else, and people really laugh this time. He leans over and he goes, Renae, come on, seriously? He's got to be joking here. No, Tim, that's true. Says, okay. Third time, people are laughing. He goes, Renae, I went, shut up, Tim. I'll tell you when the man lies. Just shut up.
Quit asking.
Quit asking. So about that time, the tears began. I knew that what James was sharing was truth, and he wasn't being over the top. He wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't bashing. He was just stating facts. And as I sat there, I thought, this doesn't sound weird on Sunday in the Mormon church. Why does it sound weird sitting here in the Christian church? I don't understand. But the tears started. When the program was over, when the service was over, Tim got up and he's grinning from ear to ear. And he was like, isn't that awesome? And he looks at me and goes, you're crying. I went, yeah. And I kind of motioned, like, leave me alone. And he goes, do you want to meet him? No, I don't want to meet him. He just destroyed my world. He took my world and crushed it. No, I don't want to meet the man. And so I left that day in tears. But as I left, I thought, you've got to stop rationalizing your beliefs. You've got to realize that no matter what happened in that prayer back in 1976, that this is false. There is no way. I can't explain that prayer in 1976, and I don't know why God would tell me to join his church or join this church if it wasn't his church. I can't explain that, but this is false. There's a problem. And I couldn't make it make sense. So that was 2004. That was November of 2004. And so as I came to the conclusion that Mormonism was wrong, in my heart of hearts, I was so convinced that Mormonism was true for so many years that as I left, I went, if Mormonism is false, then there is no true church, there is no God, there is no Jesus, there is nothing. It's all wrong. And I basically crawled into bed for a year, I think, just in a huge state of depression and misery. At first, having freedom on Sunday to do whatever I wanted was kind of fun. But I quickly ran out of things to do. And it was like, I don't know what to do with myself. I felt lost. There was still something missing. And so 2005, I guess it was, somewhere in 2005, Tim had a job offer and left the company. And I was like, God, I'm really just now starting to even contemplate this. And you've moved Tim. Now what do I do? Who do I talk to? Well, the next day I'm given a new boss. Her name is Kelly. She's an evangelical Christian. She comes from Houston. She's based in Houston. I'm going to be in the Dallas office. She's in the Houston office. She comes in just to meet me as part of her team. And we go to lunch. And she goes, so tell me, what do you know about Jesus? I used to be a Mormon, but I'm not anymore. And she about wrecked the car. And she had to pull over. And she was like, what do you mean you used to be, and how do you know you're not anymore? And if that's the case, why don't you love Jesus? And I mean, she just boom, boom, boom. And I was like, you know this conversation is not HR appropriate. She goes, you want to report me to HR? Do it, because I'm going to talk about Jesus. That's just the way it is. So get used to it. So, and I don't really want to hear about Jesus right now. I'm still kind of in that hateful stage of I've been lied to and deceived, and I'm angry and I'm bitter, and I don't want anything to do with you or your Jesus, you know. So she goes back to Houston. She calls me every day. Renae, I've got this project for you. Oh, by the way, did I tell you what my pastor said last Sunday? Did I tell you what we're doing Wednesday? Did I tell you about this? Oh, I was reading in the Bible this morning. It said such and such. A sentence about work, and then 3 or 4 sentences about Jesus every day. And I would sit, I remember just rolling my eyes, going, oh, Make her stop. You know? So come December 2006. So this has gone on for quite some time now. It's December 2006. I'm still kind of, I know in my head that I should trust Christ. I know in my head that Christianity is right, but it's not in my heart, and I can't fully trust. I'm still, I'm not really angry anymore, but I'm afraid to trust. Trust is out the window. And so I go to Houston. Now, Kelly is my boss. Kristen is my counterpart in Houston. Her and I do the same job in different cities. And Kelly says, I'm going to have you stay at Kristen's house. She's got a really nice guest room, and I don't. I'm going to have you stay at Kristen's. And I'm like, okay. Well, then I find out Kristen's brother is the pastor of their church. Okay? And part of the weekend, now Kelly tells me to come down for a Christmas party. And I'm like, you are so not PC. We can't do Christmas parties at this company. It's a global company, and we're not allowed, can't have anything Christmas oriented. It's holiday. Got to be generic. And she's like, I'm having a Christmas party. I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. I'm having a Christmas party. The company isn't paying for anything. It is not company sponsored. I'm having a Christmas party. You're on my team. You be here.
This is Houston.
In Houston,
Yeah, of
yes. So I'm like, okay. So the company's based out of Minneapolis, but she's in Houston.
Yeah.
So I go down to Houston, come down on Friday night for the party, or Saturday, whichever it was. Part of the deal was I have to stay for church on Sunday and hear this wonderful Pastor Joel, who is not Joel Osteen, Pastor Joel. But she was like, you got to come hear Pastor Joel. I'm like, okay. So I go, and first service, I'm there, and Kristen's on the worship team. And we were talking that morning, and she said, why don't you trust Christ? What's the problem? I went, I don't really know. I know I should, but I can't. I just don't trust. Maybe it's just little technical things. I don't know. So she's on the worship team, they're singing, and all the songs are on grace. Every single song they're singing is on grace. And the pastor comes out and he goes, I sense somebody just really needs to hear some more worship songs this morning. So we're just going to keep doing worship. And I was like, that's weird. I see Kristen roll her eyes at her brother, because this is a really active, talking about the spirit. They're jumping, they're bouncing, and this little Mormon girl's like, what is wrong with you people? This is so not normal for me. And they're up there with their hands up, and they're bouncing, and all of this. And I see Kristen roll her eyes at her brother, just going, oh, I'm tired. So they continue on with more songs on grace. So they continue. He comes out again, and he goes, I think we're just going to do worship whole first service. If you want to hear me preach, you got to stay for second hour. And I'm like, oh, she's going to kill him. So we're continuing to sing songs about grace. He preaches second service. Have no clue what it was, but it was one of those, everything was directed right at me. Mm-hmm. He knew my story. He knew everything about me. He said something about things that I had had conversation with Kristen. Now, I didn't really realize that this was her brother just yet. I knew he was in the family somewhere, but I didn't really get the whole idea. I just thought they were just really super close friends. So at the end, there's an altar call. And he had everybody close their eyes and raise their hand kind of thing. And I was like, okay, God. Well, before the altar call, one of the songs they were singing was Your Grace Is Enough. You guys know that song? It's I have it on my phone, but Your Grace Is Enough. And so as they're singing, I start praying, and I'm saying, okay, God, is your grace really enough? With all you did for me in dying on the cross and all that you went through, surely I have to do something. And it was, my grace is sufficient. My grace is enough. And I was like, but seriously, don't I really have to do something? I have to do something with all that you've done and all that you've given me. And I know that I don't even really fully get all of it, but surely I have to do my part. And it was, my grace is sufficient. And I'm like, no way. There's no way. So I continue on in this. I don't even know how long. I think they went through the song over and over about 3 times. And then at the end, there's the altar call. And so as he's going through that, I'm like, okay, this may be the second stupidest thing I've ever done. But I'm going to trust one more time. And I was like, if you aren't really the God of the universe, and if you aren't really God, I am not going to survive. So now's the opportunity to tell me no. I was doing all of this bargaining. But I was like, I can't. It was so hard to trust again after having been so deceived and so hurt. I finally got to that point where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so when the altar call came, poor lady sitting beside me, I think I tripped on her twice getting out of the pew to get up to the front. It was like leaping over pews to get up there. And the guy that was up there to pray, he started to lead me in prayer, and he looked at me and he goes, this isn't your first time. And I went, no, well, yeah, no, kind of. And this friend had come up with me and she goes, she's been a Mormon forever. And he goes, oh, honey. Good old Houston. So he wrapped me up in his arms and we prayed, and it was just an incredible experience that as I look back, the thing that I remember most, I think, is just the weight that lifted off of me. I don't know if you guys experienced that, but there was such a physical weight that came off of me, pounds and pounds and pounds. It just, I felt lighter than I had ever felt, and it seemed like I walked on air for about 2 years. And my Christian friends, when I got back to Dallas and started into church and all, they were like, this will end. You will come back down to the ground. And I was like, I don't think so. I think I'm going to just stay up here. It was just an amazing, amazing feeling to know that that Christ's death on the cross was all there is, that I can add nothing to it, and that in even trying to do so, it's a slap in his face because he had already done it all. And so it was such a change, such a complete turnaround. And so then I go back and I start going to church at Pantego Bible Church, where my friend Tim had invited me. And I hadn't been to any other churches, and so I thought that would be a good place. And I met some people who knew you somehow, Rob. I don't know who it was, but I think Rebecca had told me that you had started a meetup, and I don't know if you knew her before, but...
It wasn't Brian, was it?
Well, Brian was there, but it was Rebecca who told me. So, did you know Brian before?
Yeah.
So it was probably through Brian. But they told me about Rob and that he had this ex-Mormon meetup, so I automatically assumed he was an ex-Mormon, and he wasn't, but he knew everything. First time I went to the meetup, and he was knowledgeable about Mormonism. I went to another group once, and the guy was talking about Nephi and Moroni, and I was like, see you later, dude. I was like, you don't even know. So I'm done and moved on. But it was just interesting how the timing worked out. And so I started going to Rob's meetup, and it was a huge encouragement for me, even though Tara was the only other ex-Mormon and you weren't there all the time. You were there sometimes.
Yeah.
Most of the time when I went, it was Rob and a few other guys who were interested in apologetics. And Rob would grill me, and I would feel horrible sometimes. I don't know if you remember. There was one time we're sitting, I think it was in a Chili's, but we were sitting in a restaurant for the meetup, and we're talking, and there's like 3 or 4 guys and me. And he asked me something about the temple ceremony. And of course, I'm raw, brand new out, basically. And I'm like, can't answer that. It's sacred. Off I went to the bathroom, and I'm like, I wonder how long it'll take for them to leave, because I am not going back out. And I came back after a few minutes. But Rob is really good at making me look at. He was really good at making me look at some things that I didn't necessarily want to look at. We had one of those conversations on the discussion board too. And I don't remember the details of it, but always good at making me look at the truth and not just turning my head, sticking my head in the sand and letting me get away with that. But anyway, so now I think we move up to like 2009, I think was the first year I came out to Utah for Manti. And Rob convinced me to come. Just come out on the streets and pray. That's all. Just come pray. We need prayer warriors on the street. Or maybe it was John. I don't know if you were here. Both of you probably.
Just
We just
moved.
moved.
Yeah.
Probably both of you. Just come. You just got to come experience it once. So I came. I was on the streets of Manti, I think all of 10 minutes before my mouth was moving. And And that wasn't necessarily a good thing because I didn't know a whole lot yet. I knew all about Mormonism, but I didn't know all about Christianity. I was still learning so much. And I thought, well, I can talk to you about this side, but not this. Fortunately, Brian came, and Brian and I partnered up, and so it was my saving grace. But while I was here, God broke my heart for the Mormon people. I had been angry at people who had lied to me, and I felt deceived me. And it clicked with me, they were probably as deceived as I was. And that was when the time came that when that happened, I just knew that I needed to be here. And I cried all the way back. We actually flew in and out of Vegas instead of out of Salt Lake. It was a lot cheaper. So we're driving back to Vegas, and I'm crying all the way. And poor Brian and Rebecca are like, it'll be okay. You can come back next year. You know, or just all of this. It'll be okay. And I was like, I need to be here. I was raising my grandson. I had custody of him. I had a ton of debt, and I had my mom. And there were a lot of things that just for various reasons it wasn't going to work for me to move. And I was really disappointed. I prayed, and I was like, okay, God, I need something. I know you want me to do ministry. I know you want me to use, you're going to use all of this past history, all of this Mormonism for something good. And you just got to lead me to where it is. And James Walker started showing up on my Facebook newsfeed. I don't even remember friending him. I don't think I ever would have, and I don't think he knew who I was to friend me. But he started showing up on my newsfeed, going here to preach on this, going there to preach on that, different things. And I went, that ministry's right here in Arlington. Maybe there's something I can do there. So I contacted James. Now this is the guy who was speaking that day at church with my friend Tim, and now he's my boss. So I interviewed with James and started working with him. So he jokes frequently. He's like, Renae didn't like me much that day we met. I went, no, I didn't like you at all. There was not much about it. But now he's my boss. And so I've been with Watchmen since 2011. And I was part-time for a couple of years, and then in 2013 I went full-time. So I've been doing full-time ministry for the last couple of years. In October of this year, I was here in Utah for a week, and every single day there was something ministry related that happened and something that said, now's the time. I have been praying every year when I come from Anti, and it's like, nope. And God has shut that door repeatedly since 2009 or 10. And so when I was here in October, just before I came, I was like, okay, God, I'm not even going to ask, because obviously you don't want me in Utah. So I'm not even going to ask. I'm just surrendering it all to you right now. If you want me there, you're going to have to make it very clear, because I'm just going to go do my trip, come home, and we're done. I'm not even going to ask about it. And every day things happened. And then when I went home, the same thing. The gal whose house, there's a woman that I lived with that she just opened her home to missionaries. And as I got home, I was headed to my room with my suitcase. And she was like, Renae, God told me while you were gone that you're going to move to Utah. So I just need to know your timeline. And it was like, what? And she was like, God prepped me already, actually before you left. But while you were gone, I could just hear through all the text and the phone calls, and as God spoke to me in prayer, I know you're going to be, he's called you to Utah. And I had felt that while I was here, but I was like, okay, apparently I didn't surrender well enough. I need to pray some more. And I wasn't really all, because I had just said I'm not going to do that, and so here I'm feeling this, and so we're sensing that. And so Cindy says that, and I'm like, nah, no way. So I'm talking to some folks at home group, at my small group with my church, and somebody said something about, how was the trip? Tell me about it. And I started talking. He goes, do you know how you just lit up? Why aren't you in Utah? You need to move there. And it was one thing after another, after another. And so it opened up that now was the time. And so I was here in mid-October, and I think it was mid-November when I was like, okay, if this is the call, then you're going to have to provide. And I was able to raise the support I needed to get moved here. And the timing was right. Everything just kind of fell into place, boom, 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 in the space of about 3 weeks from the decision of, yes, I'm going, to when I left. And my grandson came with me on the trip, which he was having a lot of issues at home, and it was a remarkable time for him and I to talk and to share. And so that helped that relationship kind of renew and restore. And so I got here December 2nd, and there's been lots of snow that has isolated me in Santa Quinn. But I'm getting braver about getting out in it and just coming on. And I haven't talked yet about Redeemer. That was part of the reason I wanted to come. A friend of mine, Rob mentioned him in prayer, Pastor Kevin Rutledge, moved here actually a year and a half ago to plant a church from his church in Fort Worth. Redeemer was Redeemer Fort Worth, and it's Redeemer Orem here. And he moved here about a year and a half, but they've been meeting in his house. And in October, they got in a building sometime in the summer and had been working on it. And in October, they had their launch service. And one of the things he has found, he's had lots of questioning Mormons come to the church and stuff, but then there's nobody there who's been a Mormon. So that was one of the things he told me when I was here. He said, I need somebody who has been a Mormon and can help these people with that transition. A lot of times when they come in, they go, well, you don't really get it. You know the stuff, but you haven't been through it. Mm. And so they would then leave. And so part of what I felt God calling me is to help with that. So that's kind of my role at the church, is to kind of be that, hold your hand while you go through the misery of the transition, to come out on the other side where it's awesome. But to know that there's something on the other side. It's not just the dark hole. I even thought it was, that there is nothing. There is something. So, anyway, that's kind of my story in a nutshell. Do you guys have any questions?
I have a comment. This
Yes?
is very funny. So I remember we were driving from a Chili's after a meetup one time, and Renae and I were talking, and the Bible that she bought at that Christian bookstore was the exact same one that I bought, like one of my first ever study Bible.
What study Bible? I didn't know
And
that.
the same color, too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
same color. It was
I
like
didn't know
brown
that.
and blue or something.
Yeah, mine's blue.
Yeah, blue and light blue, or dark blue and light blue. Yeah, Maddie has it now, so I can
Okay.
find it. But and one of the funny things that she said, and we both said, we're like, wow, like in the margins it
Yes.
says it could mean this or it could
Oh,
mean that. And
yes.
like, this is really hard for us because we'd always been told exactly what everything meant.
I almost threw the Bible when I
Yeah.
did that. I was reading in the margin. It said, there are two schools of thought. Some people think this way and some people think this way.
Early
And I was like,
manuscripts.
no!
Yeah.
I was just like,
But we both, being ex-Mormons, to both have that like frustration. Like we just wanted them to tell us exactly what it meant.
Yes.
We were so used to them just
The
telling
back
us
of the book
what
answer.
everything meant.
yes, give me the,
The back of the book answer.
Yes.
Yeah. But
It's
so
black and
anyways, it's just
white,
funny
there
that
has
we
to be a right
ended up-
one.
And I
That
did
is crazy.
everything. And I remember we were talking about it in the car once, and I just thought, that's so funny that God gave us, because same thing, when I went to buy my first study Bible, it was like, I didn't know what to do. I just grabbed one that I thought the color was cool, and it was like on sale or something, so I was like, I want this one. And I knew I wanted NIV, because that's what my pastor would preach from.
see, and I didn't have a church yet. I was still,
Yeah.
I wasn't going to the Mormon church anymore, but I hadn't been to the Christian church, so. Yeah, it was quite a mess. So I didn't realize that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious as to where in Germany you lived.
It was a little tiny town called Recklinghausen, and it was way north and east. We were about an hour and a half from the Holland border,
Okay,
way up north.
okay. Earl served in Germany. We lived there for a year and a half.
Where at?
Oh, down in Bavaria. We were in Neuilly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody I've met is somewhere south. We're the only ones I've seen that were up north, but
Okay.
yeah.
How long were you there?
I was only there about 7 months. Yeah, I was pregnant and they gave me the choice to have the baby there or come back to the States. And my husband was already being abusive and I was like, send me back to the States. So I went back to the States and had my son there. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you get your name removed?
Yes.
was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Were you? Yes. I after I was baptized, I joined Pantego, trusted Christ in December 2006, and they had a baptismal service where they called it all church baptism. They did it during service. Had a baptismal font on the stage kind of thing, and
We were there for
No, we
that.
went
y'all
for
were
that.
there.
Yeah.
And it was right after that I put my sent my name in to have it removed. So I had a Mormon friend who she was like, now Renae, you've got to think about, I didn't go into this, my daughter talked about her dying and all of that, but she's buried. She went to the temple a week before she died. So she's buried in her temple clothes. And this friend of mine that's Mormon, she said, I know you really want to have your name removed. And her family was kind of 50-50, about half her family was out, so I thought, she gets it and I can talk to her a little bit. And I'd run into her and she'd ask me what was going on, and she had heard I was having my name removed and different stuff, and she goes, why would you do that? Why don't you just leave your name on the roll just in case? Just in case it's right. And I said, well, I looked at her and I said, well, you know, if Jesus really is God, and he knows all, he knows that I've denounced Mormonism in my heart. He knows that I don't believe it. He knows that I've said it's false. It's a bunch of lies. It's a concocted bunch of bull. And I said, so why would having my name on the paper make a difference when he knows my heart?
Amen.
And she was like, but just in case.
She said,
And I was like, it isn't going to help me. He knows where my heart is. So it's not going to help me if my name's on that paper. So I did. I had my name removed that year. So it was 2007. I had my name removed. Yes.
Did it take long?
It took, I sent my paperwork in, and I didn't you get the letter back that says, you know, there's all these eternal consequences. Please think and pray about it, blah, blah, blah. And then I had a call from the bishop who said he needed to talk to me. And I said, you really don't. This is done. I've already sent it in. I had read where once you sign the paper, you're done. You don't really have to wait on them to tell you, you know, so far. So I kind of went, you know, we really don't. There's not really anything to talk about. And I said, I'll be happy to meet with you. I don't have anything against you, but there's nothing for us to discuss. And he said, well, I'd just like the opportunity to talk to you. Would you come to my office? And I said, no. I said, you can come to my home, or we can go meet and have a glass of iced tea. In good Southern tradition, Texas tradition. And he got mad at me when I suggested we go have a glass of iced tea. So he said, all right, I'm going to just do what I can to get this done. A month later, I still hadn't had anything. And I contacted him. And I said, do I need to contact the media or my attorney?
That's what you do.
And he said, you wouldn't really do that. And I said, you're dragging your feet. It had been about 3 months. I said, it's been long enough. This should be done. So if that's what I need to do to get it finished, then I will. And he said, I'll have it taken care of. And he did. I had it in about a week.
Yeah.
So.
That's
Did
exactly
you feel
what
any
you do.
closure?
Oh yes.
Okay.
For me, it was an absolute, in the community where I live, Arlington, Texas, it's not a tiny town. It's a pretty good sized town, but a lot of people knew me there and at work. And people knew I was a Mormon. And so for me, I had two things. I had to have my name removed, and I had to start wearing crosses everywhere I went. So I had to make a statement. And I don't do it as much here because I want to get in the conversation. I don't want it to stop the conversation. But in Texas, I didn't leave my house for eons without a cross on somewhere. Earrings, necklace, both, on my shirt, something. There had to be strong declarations. And I would run into people in the grocery store that I knew in the ward. And it always cracked me up if I'm walking up in the parking lot. I'm in the parking lot by this row of cars, and you know, people drive, and then there's another row. I had one gal that I knew really well that I used to visit teach, had a bunch of kids, and she suddenly started herding her kids up around. They were all trailing along behind her, and she was like, oh, come here, come here, come here. And she scooted them way over to the other side, and I said, I promise I'm not going to hurt your kids. Just was going to say hi. And she was like, oh, shh, shh, don't talk to her, don't talk to her. And just kind of shuffled her kids into the car, and I was like, okay, whatever. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was kind of fearful of people if they left the church. I didn't know too many of them, but I figured there's really something wrong with them, or
Yeah.
they're kind of kooky, and I wouldn't want to associate with them.
Right. Right. I was always curious. We had a couple of people who I knew had left from our ward, and one of them was a Sunday school teacher, and he actually stood up one Sunday, and I'll never forget. He was saying, we're the Pharisees. If you would just look at this, we're the Pharisees. And he kept saying that, and I was like, I don't even know what a Pharisee is. What's he talking about? I was like totally lost. But I look back at that now and I go, that was his last Sunday. He never came back after that Sunday. And I'm like, what happened to him? Where did he go? Why didn't I ever run into him? I would love to ask some questions. But my friend that was sitting beside me was in the ward, and she said he's had an emotional breakdown. So,
Yeah.
and she's just nodding and being real sweet and just nodding along with him. I'm like, what is he talking about? She goes, oh, he's had an emotional breakdown, don't worry about it. And I just smiled and nodded and walked out, and I'm like, I look back at that and think, what a great opportunity for me to, what are you talking about? Just raise my hand and go, I don't understand. So, yeah.
What happened with your mom? Did she come to Christ, or what was?
Mom, I struggle with that. I honestly don't know. I had a long conversation with James when she was diagnosed with cancer. And Mom knew her Bible. She read the Bible all the time, and she could quote all kinds of scripture. But she never spoke of, you didn't see evidence of the Lord in her life. And she didn't speak about it. She didn't like praying in public. She didn't like praying before meals. She wouldn't do anything that you would normally do. She didn't like to participate in activities at church. She would go to church occasionally, but not very often. She came with me for a little while at one point to Pantego. And she told me every time, I don't like the pastor and I don't like this church. And I went, well, let me help you find another church. I'll find you someplace that you like and you're comfortable with. No, I'm here for you. And she'd just kind of grumble along. But when she was diagnosed with cancer and terminal, it began to be a big concern for me. And I tried to talk to Mom, and she was like, what I believe is none of your business. And she would just kind of shut me down. And so in talking to James once, he said, people who read the Bible typically have some level of belief in God. And he said, I don't know what level she's at or where she's at in that, but I don't think she'd read the Bible.
When did she start reading the Bible? Because you said
she has always read the Bible, even when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But she's never been a churchgoer. She's never been one to, she's always been more in the drinking. She quit drinking years ago, but when I was little, they drank all the time and they were into the party scene. And then as I got older, it was just all about me. What can I do to relax and have fun on the weekends? And so she did that for a long time. And she just never was one to do or to be a part of. So I didn't see a lot of evidence of it, but she did read her Bible all the time. So some level. I don't know where, how much, and I don't know if it's enough, but hopefully she had faith in Christ that she would not share with me. So I don't know. And it was funny, when I first went into ministry, my mom was furious with me and angry that I would quit a good job and all of this to do this, and she was mad. And then when she was sick with cancer, she was in the hospital a couple of times for surgeries and whatnot. This is my daughter. She's a full-time missionary. You should talk to her. Who are you? So she did a whole 180 on that. She got to where she was very happy about what I was doing. So I hope that had some sort of influence or connection in that, in her story.
Why are you in Santa Quinn?
Because I had an offer of a home to live in while somebody's in Yuma. It's a free place to live except for utilities, and I don't have enough money for rent, so it's a good place to be. Yeah, the gal whose house I'm staying in comes back the end of March or sometime in April, and she has said I can stay with her a year, but it's a long way down there. I'd like to get moved.
Closer to Orem.
Provo Orem area, yeah. Redeemer's in north Orem, I guess, way on the north side. So
how long does that take?
it's a 35-minute drive.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a ways. So, all right.
Any other last questions? Okay, well, Renee, would you close us in prayer?
Yes. Father, as we come before you, we just thank you, Lord, for your work in our lives. We thank you for saving each of us. And Father, we thank you for just being involved in our daily lives, knowing the things that are best for us, and knowing that that you have a plan. Father, we thank you for Rob and Tara opening their home once a month to do this ministry and to just have the opportunity to share with one another, to encourage one another, and to hear each other's stories. We love you and we praise you, Father, and we just ask your blessings on us as we go home. And we say all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. I was in prayer at the when I was talking about when I prayed and all the stuff that I felt, and I couldn't understand why God would tell me to join this church when it wasn't his church. And I was in counseling at some point, I'm trying to think what year it was, probably 2007, maybe 2008. And the counselor, the pastor had just had me up and had shared some of my story. And he asked me, he said, can I hear more about that? How did you become a Mormon? So I went through the story like I did y'all. And I'm looking at him, and I'm sitting here, and the pastor's there, and then the counselor's there, and then the door to the office is over on the other side. And the counselor's looking scared. He is sweating, and he is just looking petrified as I talk about the blanket wrapping around and the warmth and how I heard these words pass through my mind. And I'm thinking in my head as I'm talking, I'm going, you're scaring the counselor? And there's going to be two guys in with a long sleeve, really long sleeve white thing come to get you in a minute. You're going to be hauled out of here because you're crazy, and it's not good to scare the counselor. And about that time he asked me, he said, when you felt the hug, was it emotional or was it physical? And there was a blanket and then the hug. And I said, the hug was physical. I could feel the hug. And he said, that wasn't the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit would never be physical. And it clicked with me then that it wasn't the Holy Spirit who had answered the prayer I had prayed so many years ago. Oh. And it was the first time I could let go of that. It had kind of hung in the back of my mind, but why did God tell me this was his church? And so, it wasn't God. And two of my favorite things that happened with Scripture along the way was the one that talks about the enemy disguises himself as light. As angel of light. That's one. Mm-hmm. And then our hearts are deceitful. And so those two together with that, it kind of answered all of my questions of what happened and why did that happen.
Could let go of that.
And I could let go of that.
Yeah. How long were you LDS?
31 years. I joined at 18. I was a convert at 18, and I left at 49.
I left at 49 too.
Yes, high five.
49 and a half.
Yeah.
I was like, thank you, Lord. Before I was 50, thank you.
Yes. I bought a house that year, and it was my 50th birthday. I remember having a party, and I was like, I invited my home teachers, which was actually they'd given me a couple at this point because I was
Single.
Well, and so it was a couple, and I wouldn't let anybody but them come, so I invited them to my housewarming, and I had my daughter come, and she was the bartender, and I had all kinds of liquor, and all my work friends, and the home teacher and his wife were the only two that were there that were Mormon, and it made them so uncomfortable. I look at that now, and I think that probably wasn't a great thing to do, but at the time, it was one of those yes moments. In your face, I'm out, but now I look back and I go, that wasn't the most gracious thing to do.
No, but they were very gracious to come.
They were,
They
and
must
they
have liked
stayed
you.
they did, and they stayed for quite a while, and they were there probably a couple hours, and I'm like, we gotta go. I'm like, okay, see ya. Anyway, all right, sorry.
Well, thanks again.
Yes, I wanted to get in on the what happened with this.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.